Thank you for joining today's presentation entitled Can Games Support Ethical Thinking with Dr. Karen Schrier. Before I get started, I want to review a few housekeeping items to let you know how you can participate in today's web event. We are looking at an example of the GoToWebinar attendee interface, which is made up of two parts. The viewer window on the left, which allows you to see everything the presenter will share on their screen, and the control panel at the right. Within that control panel, how you can participate in today's event. So let's look at that. By clicking on the orange arrow, you can open and close your control panel. From the View menu, you can set the control panel to not auto-hide when inactive if you prefer to always keep it open. The audio pane provides audio information. By default, you have joined the webinar via mic and speakers. Click Audio Setup to select your computer speaker or headset devices. If you prefer, you can join the audio via telephone by selecting Use Telephone, and the dial-in information will be displayed, including an audio pin. If you would like to ask any questions of today's presenter over the phone, you must enter your audio pin in order to have your line unmuted. During the presentation, you have the ability to send questions to our webinar staff through the questions pane. Simply type in your question and click Send. At the end of the presentation, we will address as many questions as we have time for. If during the presentation you have a question, you may ask it by raising your hand and typing it into the chat box. This option is located on the Grab tab. We will have an open question and answer at the end of today's session, and as a final reminder, today's webinar is being recorded, and everyone will receive an email within 24 hours with a link to review a recording of today's event. Thank you everyone for attending, and I am Anna Montalbano, the Electronic Resources Specialist here at IGI Global. I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Karen Schrier, our featured symposium guest this month. Karen Schrier is an educator, designer, and producer. She just received her doctorate in Instructional Technology and Media from Columbia University, where she wrote her dissertation on ethics in games. While earning her doctorate, she worked as the Director of Interactive Media at ESI Design, and an executive producer at Scholastic, and a producer at Nickelodeon. Karen serves on the editorial board of the Journal of Game Design and Development Education, and was the Games Program Co-Chair at the ACM SIGGRAPH Conference in 2008 and 2009, and taught design at Parsons and Hunter College. She also speaks internationally on games and learning at conferences such as GDC, SIGGRAPH, AERA, Games for Change, NECC, and SITE. She has also co-created many digital properties such as Mission US for Crown or Colony, Scholastic Summer Reading Challenge, and Scholastic.com. Nickelodeon's Parents Connect. Her digital and non-digital games have been featured in festivals such as Come Out and Play. Karen holds a master's degree from MIT and a bachelor's degree from Amherst University. Karen is also an esteemed author and editor of IGI Global. She was recently featured in Designing Games for Ethics, Models, Techniques, and Frameworks, published in 2010 by IGI Global. At this point, I will turn the webinar over to Dr. Schrier.
Hello. Can everyone hear me? Hello?
I can hear you.
Great. Awesome. Okay, well, thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate everyone coming today. So I just wanted to start by just finding out, like, what do you guys think are ethics? Just put up a poll for you, and I'll just launch that right now, and everyone can vote on what they think are ethics. I'll just give you guys a few more minutes, a few more seconds, and then Well, it looks like we're kind of tied between a system of choices and moral judgments and knowing the difference between right and wrong. I would say that ethics really is almost like a conglomeration of all of those things. Ethics, the way I define it in writing this series of books, is ethics is a system of choices and moral judgments that are thought to achieve the life of a good human being. But really, none of these are prescriptive. In a lot of ways, ethics are kind of what you think, how you define it yourself. And there's lots of different almost controversies about, how do we define ethics? And that's kind of something that we're always trying to figure out as we go through life. What is right and wrong for us? What is right and wrong for a specific context? I also want to urge everyone out there to definitely ask questions while I'm presenting. I want to hear from you. I want to be able to know that you're out there and just find out what you're thinking. So please feel free to make comments and ask questions while we're going. And well, what do ethics? What do they mean to you? And a lot of times people think of ethics, they think, oh, okay, it's about violence, it's about sexism, like this is what they think of when they think of video games and ethics. But I'm curious, what do you guys think? And so I'll just put up another poll for you. Give you a few minutes to think about that. When you think of ethics in video games, what do you think? Don't be shy. Whatever. It could also be none of these, but I'm just curious what you think. What kind of first pops into your head when you think ethics in games? Okay, so just a few more seconds, and great. Okay, well, it looks like a lot of people said aggression, obesity, and other problems that are possibly associated with video games. And some people said marketing games to young people. Some people voted on the violent video games, but the number one was the aggression and obesity. And so, a lot of times people think, what are the problems associated with video games? What I'm interested in is kind of not thinking, are games inherently good or bad? Are they causing obesity? Are they causing aggression? Are they too violent? Are they too addictive? But I'm more interested in thinking about, well, how do people negotiate values, and how might play foster reflection on one's own societies or particularly games ethics? So these are kind of the questions that were driving me when I was thinking, okay, well, I want to, I'm really interested in this intersection of ethics and games. I'm interested in, the question, and these are the kind of the questions that were driving me. And when I was developing this book series, how can we evaluate ethical thinking in games? Are there frameworks and research techniques that we can use to evaluate, are people actually thinking through ethics in games? Or are they just violently killing people? Or is there something else going on? How do people make ethical decisions in games? Some of you might be surprised to even find out that there are ethical decisions in games. What kinds of design principles and metrics should we use to better support ethical thinking in games? So, if the suggestion is that we can support ethical thinking in games, are there certain ways that we can design them better or differently to support those kinds of thinking and reflection? And then also, what are the ethics of game development and distribution? What does it mean if we have a game development company of all, certain kinds of policies and certain kind of people that are creating the game, certain kinds of processes for creating them, and the way that they might be marketing it or the way that they might be distributing those games? Are there ethics of production and distribution? And then how might values be reflected and propagated through play? So how might we be able to express certain kinds of values, one way or the other through play? And the thing is, I'm going in with this hypothesis that, yes, it's true that games can have maybe some negative effects, right? I don't want to say that, they can't, but, a book can have a negative effect. Any experience can have a negative effect, and any experience can have a positive effect. So I really want to stress that and emphasize that in creating this book, I wasn't thinking about, okay, well, are just video games themselves ethical? It's not about them as a product being good or bad. It's really about what we do with them. So I'm curious, people out there, just curious in general, are people out there gamers? And here, there's actually quite a few games that are currently available, commercially available, popular, super bestsellers this year, bestsellers in past years, that actually have ethical questions embedded in them. And again, you might be surprised to hear that games like Mass Effect, games like the Fallout series, Red Dead Redemption, all of them have, what's interesting about them is that they have sometimes these morality kind of spectrums where you get part of the game is that you get judged on how moral you are, the kinds of choices you make through the game. And I'm curious, how many of you have played Fallout 3? And so I'm, just to see, and maybe the better question is, how many of you are gamers at all? And so maybe, instead of have you played Fallout 3, have you played any games that have ethical decisions in them? And so I'll give you just a few seconds to, have you played any game? Okay, so most of you have voted already, and it turns out that almost all of you have said no. I have never played a game that has an ethical decision in it. And that surprises me, because I think what happens is a lot of people think about games like Halo and Grand Theft Auto, and even those games have ethical decisions in them to some extent. But there are a ton of games that are super popular today that actually have, as part of the gameplay itself, such an integral part, making ethical decisions. And so, it's interesting to me to think about, okay, well, what does that mean? How are people thinking through those ethical decisions in those games? And a significant chapter, a couple of chapters in the books have definitely looked at, especially if we a few chapters have really looked at, for example, Mass Effect and Red Dead Redemption and Fallout 3. All of those, there's chapters about each of them and how people, thinking through frameworks of how people might consider, ethics in that game and how they might compare to other experiences they've had in their lives. So, for example, in Fallout 3, you get kind of these different karma points, right? So if you kill a very evil character, you'll get like a ton of karma points. And if you donate caps to a church, you might get a bunch. But then if you murder someone who's good, you might get negative points. So in one of the chapters in the book that we're talking about, the designing games for ethics, one of the chapters talks about, thinking about, okay, well, what are these consequences, and how do we think through the way that the game is balanced and the way that the game is balanced for different kinds of actions and activities. So I just want to stop and make sure that no one has any questions, and if there's anything anyone's unclear about or intrigued about, okay, I'm just going to keep going.